Insurrection was a pleasure to do. A feature motion picture takes between 55 and 65 days usually to shoot, as opposed to a television series that takes 7 days to shoot 1 hour. So even if you expanded that, 14 days to shoot the same amount of footage that you will use in a movie, and the movie takes 65 days to do. So obviously you have a lot more opportunity to make everything absolutely perfect, to try things, throw them out if they don't work, and try something else.
Well, I think of the 3 feature films that we have done with the Next Generation group, this undoubtedly is the biggest. It's also undoubtedly the film with the most number of exteriors. I would say that close to half of this movie has been shot on various locations, which is a whole different experience than being in the comfort and security of sound stages at Paramount. There were a lot of problems to solve on this picture. It's a monumental picture in some ways. This is probably the most scenery we've built for a single Star Trek motion picture since Star Trek the Motion Picture, when everything was absolutely brand new. This is 18 more sets in this picture than we had in Star Trek First Contact, and there were 37 sets in Star Trek First Contact.
Inside the caves, quickly! Everyone!
We are in hydrothermal caverns, and we're in dry caves and wet caves, and we have 400 people climbing hillsides in various landscapes, starting at a riverside, going across to a lake, through meadows and up mountainsides and into caves and out of caves. And those are just exteriors. And then we have all the ship's interiors. We see Riker's quarters, we see Picard's quarters, we see Troy's office, we see a banquet hall, and obviously the bridge, the sick bay, the transporter room, all the corridors, the engine room that we're sitting in right now, and then repeat all of those things in the Sona ship. In addition to that, we have 3 new shuttles. We have a Sona shuttle, a Federation scout ship, a Federation shuttle, and the captain's yacht. And we've always had a captain's yacht implied in all the starships ever since the original classic television series. There's a little nodule on the bottom of the saucer section that everyone always pointed to and said that's where the captain's yacht is. But we've never actually seen it. And so this time we decided we'd show the fans what the captain's yacht looks like. To have the opportunity to design from the ground up an entire town is, and it's not like a Western town. It's not just like one street with a lot of buildings and a church at the end. You know, it's the bakery, it's the rotunda where you have the marketplace, it's the individuals' houses, it's the house of the mayor, it's the house of the heroine, Anij, it's the monastery on the hill and the chapel across the river. There's the farmyard and the blacksmith shop. It's a tapestry of real life. We started out with a bare piece of ground next to a lake, which looks more like a river than a lake, and we created this entire community.
The village, I have to say, was some of the most fun I've ever had on Star Trek. And we could never figure out what the power source was. So when we had lampposts, we couldn't show electric lights or glowing crystals or lamps or candles or any of that. So I designed up some bells-shaped things that were hanging on a post, and light was coming out of them. Nobody really knew what the source of the light was. I found a place in Fort MacArthur that this guy made these wonderful 7 and 8 foot tall metal freeform sculptures. So we stashed those in and around the village all the time. And that was just so much fun. It really was.
When I was at the studio I think doing some meetings about costumes or something. The production designer, Herman Zimmerman, had shown me a model of the village and talked to me about his research for these people and the Eastern influences. He showed me some drawings from photographs from Bali and some of the philosophies that he imagined would be sort of integrated to create sort of Baku spirit. And it was inspiring. It was sort of a cross-referencing of a lot of the research I'd done. And I saw this model and I thought, oh my God, I can't wait to see how that is actually physicalized in this setting. And so the day that we arrived, it was like stepping into a world. I mean, this whole world with a river and bridges and really quite beautiful. And it takes you to another place. And as an actress, you can't ask for anything more.
Benefits of having a model crew on the show is to make miniatures of not only the ships but the sets as well. We had two on our show. One of them was Randy Cooper, who used to be a major effects miniature maker and has moved on to do set models and that type of thing. He did a lot of work on the Baku village, as well as another model maker that built the collector ship. And with the work with the miniatures, they can take a tiny camera and a mirror and go through the sets, kind of plan out the angles, plan out the storyboards. It really benefited Ray Harvey, who was doing the boards, and it also benefited the construction crew of what they had to build, what was going to be seen, what wouldn't be seen. And having that really benefited not only the production crew, but it also did me in a way where I could see, oh, if I change this, I can change that. And so it adds a lot of perspective to not only the design team, but the overall production.
My favorite thing were the llamas.
Hello. Nothing like a llama on the set.
There's this one llama named Kissy. And need I say more? The name says it all. Kissy is adorable, and they do this thing where they smell your breath is what they like. And so they come right up to your nose, and it's sort of, but it's very funny. And once you get used to it, and you come in the morning and the llamas are there. And once I happen to have some trail mix, and they like trail mix.
Right, this llama here eating the tree is Kissy, and this cute little llama is Desiree, and they're actually full sisters from two different litters, yeah. Kissy is about 5 years old, and Desiree is about 3 years old. They're actually very sweet and, you know, friendly animals, and it's just a matter of training them to wear the packs and be around all the crowds, the lights, and everything like that. And we start them out when they're very young. We travel them so they get used to it all.
What's it like acting with a llama?
Well, I never actually acted with the llama, but it's a lot of fun. You know, I pet them a lot of times. They dye-colored the back gray or something, and
well, I've kissed
fun.
one or two. In fact, have you ever met or kissed Kissy? Kissy the llama?
Kissy the llama.
She's kind of the head llama.
This film, at last count, I think has 288 visual effects shots. Having said that, the two companies who are handling the majority of the shots are Santa Barbara Films, who's doing a lot of the exterior ship shots, who've done some of the television work for us, and VFX Blue Skies, who are doing what we're calling the altered reality scene, and the palm pet, which is this wonderful, charming character that's introduced that the boy plays with, and the holographic ship. It's tedious. I won't pretend it's not. But when the shots are finalized and when they work, they are what trekkers, and a lot of people who go to the movies are waiting for, are those spectacular, how do they do that, or the shots that push you back with the visuals and with the sound into your seat. And they're a big, big part of Star Trek.
The Federation ship has been disabled. Separation in 20 seconds.
What is that?
I don't know.
In most starships, when we design them, the bridge is the most important element. And there is certainly a very elegant bridge provided for the Sona, who are a glittering people. They like jewels and they like silver and gold and all the precious metals. And they're very Art Deco in a way, if you wanted to give them a design direction.
Action!
Report.
Phaser blast, origin unknown. Photon torpedoes, brace for impact. Shake! 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 Warning, outer hull damage, deck 3. Visual contact.
The Sona bridge has got a lot of silver and a lot of plush materials. The captain's chair isn't as much a chair as it is a couch. It's a huge double-wide settee that is on a turntable so that Rafa, who is the commander of the Sona, can spin around and walk into his tactical room without too much effort.
Action!
Admiral Dowley will not be joining us for dinner.
Deploy the collector. Do you have a problem with that order?
The computers that are on board are linear and hexagonal shapes rather than analog and or digital that we might be familiar with.
Lie down, Admiral. The girls will take 20 years off your face.
The body sculpture studio is the more important set in the interior of the Sona spaceship. It's a facility in which they try to maintain some semblance of youth. Of course, they're succeeding very badly because they're all terribly wrinkled. They've all had one too many facelifts. Some of them have had several too many facelifts. And again, they are serviced by the subjugated races that are their handmaidens, for instance, and they're lovely alien women trying to trowel on makeup to aging Sona females, and there's quite a lot of elaborate medical equipment that they do face stretching and nipping and tucking and liposuction and all of those things that we're familiar with in plastic surgery. Mostly a losing battle. We built this enormous interior of a collector, the injector collector set. It was interesting because we came back and did a reshoot on it, and the original set was, I don't know, 60 feet high and probably about 40 feet around, and it was a complete structure with solid walls and a lot of lighting in it, and an elevator that moved in and out. And when we had to do the reshoot, we did the reshoot with about a 20-foot section. And the truth of the matter is, hindsight being 20/20, we could have done the entire thing as it finished in the edited version of the picture on that little set that we had built just for a reshoot of a scene. You learn by doing.
280 on take 3, marker.
Stand by, green. Taser nitrogen. Taser. Stop.
Guapo, we're getting too old for this.
After today, that won't be a problem for either of us.
I wanted to do it horizontally and film it as if it were vertical so that we could get more of a sense of weightlessness inside it. And the producers opted for not doing that. It worked fine. It was a difficult set to shoot on because all of those jeopardies that you see with Picard and F. Murray Abraham and the struggle that goes on between them, that all was done with very few stunt people and at some risk to the actors because they were on this set that was pretty dangerous to walk on. No railings, no real safety nets. It worked out fine, but as I say, we could have done it on a very much smaller set had I known any better at the time.
As an actor, I've always loved going on location. It always seems to me that there's a certain amount of vacationing time about it. It's not always comfortable, it's not always pleasant. But this time, we were blessed with wonderful locations, and I think it's true to say that at least half the film was filmed on location. Very different from the first two.
We were out for 6 or 7 weeks. We were in Thousand Oaks in this gorgeous oak grove in Ventura Farms. Herman Zimmerman built an entire village at Lake Sherwood. We did a couple of shots at the San Gabriel Dam. We then went to Mammoth and shot at Convict Lake, and then above Lake Sabrina in Mammoth. So it was, we were out there.
We all feel very blessed at those times, you know, that we go to these places and they bring along a catering truck and a comfortable trailer, and they pay us for doing it too. We're quite fortunate.
I've worked a lot on stage, which I adore, but you could never have this. You imagine it, and that's part of your job. But to stand here and look at these vistas, it's been really amazing and really exciting.
Someone said that actors act better on location because they have to defeat all the elements. They have to get beyond the sun or the rain or the wind or the natural frustration of being in a hotel and not being able to sleep, or the noise or the waves or the bugs. Whatever elements are really there on location help an actor focus on what he's doing. You're more honest because you are actually standing on the top of a mountain. You're not pretending to stand on top of a mountain. You're standing on top of the mountain.
Captain, Salvador Gallatin, Zona Command.
Lieutenant Curtis, Attaché to Admiral Dougherty.
Are you all right?
We've been treated extremely well.
Lake Sherwood is where Herman Zimmerman and his brilliant design team built the Baku village. And we looked through a lot of different architectural references, and what we found that felt appropriate for this sort of new age idyllic society that the Baku were meant to represent was a Indonesian coastal, peaceful, all-natural elements used in the building, earth tone colors. There's a lot of terracotta and beiges, a lot of thatched roofs. You felt like the materials used to build the village had actually come from this mythical Baku land.
The Baku village was an expression of a kind of Balinese temple design that I actually have the magazine at home that Rick Berman handed me one day and said, "What do you think of this idea? Do you think that might be the kind of place?" And of course it was a gorgeous hotel in Bali that we couldn't afford to duplicate, but I was able to extrapolate some of those ideas, and that became the city square, which is round. Wasn't a square at all. But
the most significant challenge about Lake Sherwood and about getting the look right was that we were fighting the weather.
While we were constructing it, it was the rainy season, and when the construction was over, it had already, everything in California had started to go brown. So we had to water it in order to keep it green. So all of that lush vegetation that you think was on that planet year-round was really nip and tuck with either being drowned or being or being baked in the sun. So we had to both drain it and water it at the same time.
Captain, we have activated the transport inhibitors around the village.
Good.
Let's move these people out!
There was a huge battle scene, as you'll see in the film, where the Baku village is bombed and exploded, and we had, I think it was one of those great nights for a director where We had 8 or 10 cameras, and all the stuntmen in LA are working, and things are blowing. I mean, it's one of those nights you dream of. You're blowing up a city, and you're covering it from all angles, and it was, and you're waiting for the sun to set. So everybody's geared up, and there are hundreds of extras, and it was that kind of, it was one of those moments that you'll never, ever forget, because you just wet with anticipation. It was just great.
Amar.
Amar.
Background.
Action. My name is Soja.
Jean-Luc Picard. These are my officers, Dr. Crusher, Counselor Troy.
Troy. Would you like something to eat?
No. We're here to rescue them.
As you wish, but I would ask you to disarm yourselves. This village is a sanctuary of life.
I suspect that when people see the film, and I'm not kidding, that there will be people who want to know where this village is, where this resort is, and how do we get there. And I've worked with Herman a long time. It was, I think, his greatest achievement to date.
We've seen so many of Herman's great sets, and yet we're still infinitely surprised every time we see another one. I mean, you see this village, and it looks like it's organic to the place.
It was tasty. It was elegant. It was lush. It was all the things that the story needed. The setting was lovely. The architecture was inventive and not derivative of anything specific. It was new. It shows what an artist Herman Zimmerman really is.
The Baku needs some rest, sir. According to the geoscan, this is the safest area within the next few kilometers.
Very well. We'll take an hour. Have them break out some rations.
Aye, sir.
Ventura Farms was where the wheat was growing so beautifully, and that Leonetti and I kept having this vision that these will be fields of gold, and as the Baku wound their way back to their village, and we had beautiful helicopter shots and crane shots, a lot of which unfortunately have been cut out of the film because they were languid and beautiful and didn't really work in an action-adventure movie. But this was the area that we had to go back to pick up shots, and we had to bring our own greens, because by the time our shooting schedule was over, it looked like the desert after being very, very plush in the beginning.
When you walk along the water, feel free to go on the high road, except obviously for you and Michael, so that we have, I know the single file thing is inevitable, but I'm trying to avoid it as much as I can. When you're walking along there, feel free to clump up, and if we can go any faster, we should as well. Let's try again. Back to one, as they say.
It's also where we did the beautiful scene with Anish and Patrick with the hummingbird and the motion control camera, who dominated this set for a few days, as they are wont to do.
Isolinear tags. The transporters can lock onto them.
We have to find shelter.
There's the cavern at the base of the next hill.
This way.
All the caves were built here on Stage 18, and matter of fact, they were some of the Deep Space Nine caves that we elaborated on.
It's very tense, hot, miserable. Seymour. Frightened. Background action.
Another 43 reported taken, sir.
Shake! Cut. Great.
This is all working. We're actually going to climb up the stairs here, and this is going to be all our escape route up there. We're being chased by the bad guys, and we come in here to try and get away from them. It's a very short sequence in the movie, and it's amazing to think they build this whole thing for something that may last a minute.
Dramatically in the last couple of weeks, they've been hunting for this one dramatic location well into the time that we were in principal photography, And all kinds of suggestions had been made. We were even going to leave the country at one time. There'd even been talk of South America. But we finally went to Mammoth Lakes in Northern California, high up there on the eastern flanks of the Sierras.
I had never been up to Mammoth area, and I didn't know all of this existed in the state of California. It's pretty impressive. I'm going to be coming back up here all the time, I think. There's snow on the mountains. There's rocks. You think you're in the desert, and then you turn around and there's skiing out of the hotel. Skiing in, what are we, June, end of June? So, and it's breathtaking. We have to get up here with a helicopter, or it's a very hearty hike up the mountainside. Breathtaking weather. Clear. All of our bottles of cream and stuff go squirting out because of the atmospheric pressure, so you have to be very careful when you're going to put your little lotions.
I was looking at some still photographs only this week of that location with some people who didn't know where we were, and they couldn't believe there was somewhere like that in California. The people thought we were in the Alps.
See Mark. Check. Action! Boom!
Captain. Dana! Troy, keep these people moving!
Cut!
One of the keys to the locations in this film was to start off in a very beautiful place, a very pastoral and beautiful place, and then for these hundreds of extras that we have to continually climb higher into the mountains. It's an important story point. And we have come just about as high as we can come within the 48 states, and it's quite beautiful. I think El Nino has helped us in terms of having a lot more snow up here than usual.
I expected Julie Andrews to come into the scene at any point. You know, I mean, it was beautiful in Mammoth. I mean, again, there were drawbacks in that we're city folk, and we can't breathe in the mountains, you know. And then doing action, you know, with no oxygen is a challenge.
There was a certain sort of kind of, you know, base camp on the slopes of Everest about our first location. I don't like helicopters, and I try to avoid them wherever possible. And so for me, it was truly expeditionary. I insisted on walking rather than being ferried up to the location by helicopter. And there was also a certain amount of, I guess, of course, showing off about it, you know. But before we left the location, I was at last agreeing to be ferried down by helicopter rather than make the hike back down at the end of the day. But it did lead, it made for dramatic filmmaking, because time and time again, the moment the camera stopped rolling, you know, another helicopter, because I think we had two of them working all the time, ferrying people and equipment up onto the mountain.
The helicopter shuttle was, I thought that was a very efficiently run operation. My hat was off to them. A lot of us wanted to walk because we didn't particularly relish the idea of flying in helicopters. But after spending the day at 10,000 feet, we said, well, maybe the helicopter ride will be fine on the way down.
My name is Glenn Smith, and I'm a helicopter pilot here to support the cast and crew with equipment and personnel movements. We are in the rugged Sierra Nevada mountains at about 9,500 feet above sea level. And it's very rugged terrain, very precarious for carrying equipment and for people even walking. It's very difficult. The altitude makes it difficult for people to take even a few steps without getting winded. And I love it being up here. You couldn't ask for better weather, better scenery, and the people are excellent, great people.
That was pretty terrifying. I had my eyes closed all the way. No view. And I had the best seat in the house right in front.
There was a helicopter that looped, that picked people up at the base camp where we parked the cars. And I think it was 4 or 5 of us at a time could get into the helicopter. The area had to be cleared. The helicopter went up to the mountain to the location, dropped the 4 or 5 people off, and then went back down to the base camp. And went on for hours in the morning until everybody was up at work. And then lunch was brought up. Nobody left for the day. We were locked under this mountaintop. We didn't shoot there for long. We were only there for 4 or 5 days. But it was 4 or 5 days that people remember, some fondly, some not so fondly.
How about a passive radiation scan?
Curious. There appear to be strong neutrino emissions coming from the lake.
Convict Lake had a beautiful granite wall on the far side of the lake from
where we shot, which we used as a background for the plates of the invisible ship, which was a computer-generated nightmare. Who knew when the script was written that the idea of showing an invisible ship emerging from water would be the challenge it was? I mean, I guess if you think about it, it is invisible, so how are we meant to see it? Are we meant to see it because the water drips off it, and if we see too much of the water, then is it going to be invisible? So this became, as there is at every film, the bugaboo, the part of the movie that we're desperately trying to get right, that we kept sending back to the drawing board, if you know what I mean. We kept looking at scenes and looking at shots that I see the ship in this one, it's supposed to be invisible, the water doesn't look real. It just became that kind of scene.
I think most of the wow element of that was really the CGI work. I did have to build a boat that Picard had to row. Picard and Data and Donna Murphy had to actually physically get on and paddle, and the wind was pretty high that day, so it wasn't an easy job. In order to make it work, I had built 2 boats, and they lashed 2 of them together in order to make it usable in the wind conditions, because it was way too windy for a proa. It had to be a catamaran at least to negotiate the water.
I don't think I can do this, Jerry, without actually seeing Brent go in the water. I'm not really sure I can find the reaction.
Brent Spiner rose to the occasion. The water was allegedly 40 degrees. The water was probably 35 degrees. 5 degrees at that temperature, I'm not sure, is discernible. But he was, God knows, he was pandered to, and his costume had a waterproof suit under it, and we took all the precautions, and there was a heated room there, and there were towels and hot water, and he complained about it up until he had to do it, and then he did it without batting an eye, and asked if we wanted to do it again.
That lake was 42 degrees, and it was up in Mammoth, and all of the water was basically snow melt off, because there was still snow around the edges, and I had to walk into the water and disappear, and I had to do it. Actually, they did. Brian, my stuntman, did it first, and they shot him from a distance going in from the back, and then they brought me in, and basically he did it first so he could tell me what it was going to feel like, and then they brought me in and did close-ups so you could actually see me go under, and in the final analysis, in the final cut, they used the shot of Brian from a distance going in. They never even used me, but that was one of those stunts that I'm rather proud of. It's one of those things, every film we do, I have to do something that a human being shouldn't have to do, at least not a wimp. I mean, stuntman, okay, that's their gig.
Can he breathe underwater?
Data doesn't breathe.
It seems like every picture we do, I have to do something that, a middle-aged man really shouldn't be required to do, and this time it was going into the water.
It was a great moment for him. It was a victory, because we all knew how bloody cold it was. Nobody wanted to go in the water, least of all him. So just doing it was a triumph.
My name is Johnny Eves, and I'm the concept illustrator on Star Trek Insurrection. And we did a series of drawings for the film concerning the spacecraft and the sets and the props. And now we can have a look at some of those illustrations from the show. Insurrection was a very large challenge, mainly because we had a new effects group coming in. We were transforming from actual miniatures to CG work, and so everything had a whole new design sense to it, where with a 3/4 drawing for ILM, that would be basically what they would need, and some rough plans. The CG company that we were using, Santa Barbara, required a lot more drawings, top views, side views, plan views, a lot of other things with it. And it was also, on a mental level, trying to change from what a model couldn't do due to budget to what a computer model could. They could do a lot more motion, a lot more things without the mechanics behind it that you would need for a physical model. The first 3 ships we had to do for the Sona, we had to do Ruafo, which was the main character, his flagship, a battle cruiser, and a collector. The first ship we came up with was Ruafo's main battleship. And for the main architecture of the Sona lifestyle, I chose kind of like yard toys, like horseshoes, boomerangs, badminton birdies. So all of those are kind of the reference of where the ships were going to come from. And I remember the first thing I started doing as I went over to see Jerry Goldsmith's score on First Contact, and they had a big grand piano and was open, and I remember seeing all those strings, and I thought, wouldn't that be a great idea for a ship? And when Insurrection came along, I thought I'll transform those ideas over. And so everything that you'll see in the Sona world has kind of an open piano look, where you'll see a lot of repetitive strings, a lot of repetitive kind of wiring going through the main architecture. And being with Ruafo's ship, you'll see that through the interior of the ship. And this is also the movie where we decided that scales were going to be the very most important aspect to the drawings. The scale of the ships in Insurrection changed drastically throughout the effects part of the film, based on what would be seen with the story and how the scenes would play out. And from that point, we all kind of decided that we need to get a scale set. So we started making drawings that would show those scales. And you'd have everything in comparison to the Enterprise E. And from there, Ruafo's ship was slightly smaller, maybe about the same size as the dish of the Enterprise. It was also a funny thing because Peter Lorson was our effects supervisor. And when I sent the drawings over, he liked what he saw. He started getting it all approved. And then when we started to do the plan view, he goes, okay, put the engines on this side, make them glow over here. And I go, oh, that's the front of the ship. And so we had this huge kind of discussion on which way the ship was going to fly at that point. And I had drawn everything with a kind of forward fork motion, kind of carried the architecture through it. And Peter liked the opposite view. And so I remember we went all over that drawing to make it go the right direction, carry the right weight. And so that was kind of funny. So after that, we started putting arrows on everything, too, when they go to the meetings, which way they're initially supposed to go. With the battlecruiser, that was basically designed around a boomerang. It was kind of a forward-breaching boomerang, and in comparison, all the ships kind of had a morph shape to them. Ruafo's ship, if you spread it out, would be the boomerang ship, and if you folded it in, it would be the collector ship. So they kind of had a very similar shape, just in different proportions to be spread out, or vice versa. Everything we did for it was based on kind of a flat plane. So on a forward point of view, everything was kind of very horizontal in the design. For the Sona collector, which was one of the ships that changed scales a lot through the drawing process, from being somewhere from 2 miles long to just barely over 4,000 feet. And in the film, it actually, you can see it from the opening shot, it's about the 4,000 feet, and by the end of the movie, you have the Enterprise strafing it, and it's almost back to the 2-mile length. So it was kind of fun to watch that visually, and if you didn't know, you really wouldn't know. And the effects guys really carried that out well. I think Hunter Grassner came and did giant miniatures for the explosion scenes, in addition to the CG work. The collector ship was based on the badminton birdie. It's almost like an umbrella with the ship inside the center of it. Greg Jean, one of the old model makers from the motion picture, came on. He built a couple study models for it. And the model he built was this gigantic model, probably about this long. And they had all the intricate work on it, and they used that. Santa Barbara used a lot of the models he made for scanning, and did a lot of the work around that. Also with the collector ship, we had giant fans that were going to unfurl from the sides. And the ship was based on a 3-point architecture where you had a top fin and 2 kind of dorsal flanking fins on it. And not to make it look too symmetrical, when the blades opened up, we chose 2. And they'd kind of fold out. And the design work on that had to be very critical because towards the end of the film, there's a battle that's taking place inside the ship, and they're in the chamber that kind of goes right through the center of these two fins that open up. So what you're seeing around in the set is the storage area where those blades were conceived. When we were doing the injector designs, originally the ship is basically laid on a horizontal format. And so we were designing the set on that same type of format, where it was going to be a long corridor as opposed to a vertical one. And so we had a model maker come in. He started building all kinds of different versions of this open framework structure. First one was was a cylinder with two kind of side cylinders on the side, and you could do all your action crawling through these gantryways and across the framework. As time went on, they figured we'll just go with kind of a gravity situation in the ship where it wouldn't matter which way it was angled, you could still manipulate the set. So they went with a vertical set, which was actually easier to build, actually easier for the cast and crew to work in. And so they built a single cylinder that was all based on framework. A model maker came in, built, like I said, he built many versions of the model, and the final one was actually the simplest one that he had to do. We had another artist come in, Ray Harvey, who came in. He basically storyboarded everything, and he had to redo it every time the model changed. So he wanted doing boards, the same kind of action sequence, based on these different sets over and over and over again. When the prop department started getting their work done, we had another artist come in named Ed Natividad, and he had just come off of Star Wars Episode 1, and he came on and started doing the props, and absolutely brilliant artist. And with just a few strokes, you get not only the prop, but the action of it in the actor's hands, and just brilliant to watch this guy work. I became a big fan immediately. And he did kind of the exterior of the Baku village, what it was going to look like, as well as all the props for the show.
Take cover!
One of the favorite designs I worked on was the Sona Scout ship. And that was kind of based, again, on the boomerang, but more with aggressive angles on it. It was primarily written to be seen at night with just the lights flying by. And they actually did a lot of day shots with it. And kind of the entire film, that was my favorite of the ships that was produced for the show.
Rerouting the transport grid to avoid detection was wise, sir. However, the transporter is rarely used after 0200 hours.
Taking the captain's yacht out for a spin?
First thing we did with the Federation ships is there was a captain's yacht. And what we did with that is we took the bottom of the Enterprise model, and logically it was going to be the little torpedo launcher that you saw primarily in First Contact. And by accident, the seam line around the drawing made a perfect kind of seam for the shuttle without disturbing the torpedo launcher. And so we took a casting from ILM of the bottom of the ship, cut it along that line, and built a yacht on top of that, basically, kind of using kind of a schooner design to it with the traditional nacelles. And so there's two kind of flanking designs on the side that John Goodson had put in the miniature, and they worked excellent for the struts. We just did kind of a hinge motion on them so the nacelles could drop out as the whole yacht would detach from the ship. We had to design an entire interior of what that bay would look like, as well as a loading ramp for where the actors would board the ship. So we did kind of a tail ramp that would drop down the back of the yacht. The actors would walk down and then into the back of the shuttle or the yacht, and then when it would detach, it would break away from there. Everything would be sealed off by airlocks. The ship would drop down and kind of transform into its flying mode with the nacelles extended. And then we did a reverse design for the set that they built. So we had a drop-down ramp, and you could go into the back of the yacht, and you could see the doors were part of the architecture show. They would close to represent the back of the yacht. And we also had new shuttles that we got to design. We kind of based them roughly on an aerodynamic shape, but with the traditional small struts and the nacelles on it, like the older shuttles. Wanted to carry that architecture in a little bit, that it's still old, yet still had a new sense to it with the streamline of the Enterprise E. We wanted to be very specific that these are Enterprise E shuttles. We also had a scout ship for Data, which was kind of based on the Defiant lightly. The producers wanted to see something that followed something of the Federation and Starfleet. And so we kind of based it roughly on the Defiant. It's more of a single-man, two-man ship as opposed to a big fighter like the Defiant is. We use the same kind of color schemes, the bare metal look, and it was actually designed in a way so both ships can interact together.
Prepare the docking clamps.
We have a scene where the shuttle has a magnetic lock, and it has to dock onto the ship. So they do this maneuver throughout, and it had to have these really heavy locks that could lock the two ships together while they still had access to ports. And so on both ships, we had designed the same type of emergency hatches, which were based on circle hatches like manhole covers. So we had them on the bottom of the shuttle as well as Data Scout ship. And no matter how they wanted to visually put it together, they could dock on top, dock on bottom, depending on where they wanted to do the visual, what would be more exciting in the film. That's kind of how we based the placement of the hatches. One of the extra things we did with the Enterprise E is we had the shuttle bay. This is the first time we got to use the shuttle bay on the back of the saucer. And traditionally we were thinking about using the one on the back of the body, kind of like the old original series. That was take advantage of this big shuttle bay we have on the saucer. And we also have a scene where the warp core gets ejected. So we get to redesign the entire underbelly of the Enterprise E to have this giant warp core eject. And we had designed all the hatches, all the emergency lights, all the plasma vents, everything we needed to get that core out. And budget-wise or time-wise, the shot was never shot. You almost have a verbal description. You see the core out in the briar patch. But design-wise, we'd come up with all these really unique little ways for this core to blow out, kind of based heavily on James Cameron's Aliens, when you have the big hatches open up for the drop ship, and you have all these fantastic caution labels and the red spinning lights. So we tried to recreate that type of look that's a very hazardous area on the ship.
Detonate!
One of the big scenes we came up with was there's a pod, and it was a scene that was deleted from the final film, but Ruafo is trapped on the collector when the rings are collected. And the way the scene played, he is in this pod, gets shot out, and kind of goes back in time to almost nothing in the scene. And so we had to design this entire pod that would launch through the center of the ship, escape before it exploded, and eject into the rings. And that one, I think we drew 4 or 5 different versions of it. And it wound up almost just being basically a kind of an angled soda can. And it would eject out of the ship, and you had windows all across the top so you could see kind of the aging transformation that would take place on Ruafo as you could see where you're traveling through the open windows.
Lie down, Admiral. The girls will take 20 years off your face.
Another time, perhaps.
Your self-restraint puzzles me, Admiral. You continue to deny yourself every benefit this mission has to offer.
I was looking in the mirror. I had just shaved, and I was putting on vitamin E or one of those creams, and I started thinking right then and there, because, you know, you're basically talking about a culture that is obsessed with looking young, staying young, and there I was, doing it myself. And we had been looking for a theme for this movie for a long time. And the idea of chasing the fountain of youth, to the best of my knowledge, had not been done, at least in the modern Star Trek family of shows. And so I called Rick and I said, what do you think about this idea? And he fell in love with it.
There's an unusual metaphasic radiation coming from the planet's rings. It continuously regenerates our genetic structure. You must have noticed the effects by now.
When I started thinking about the fountain of youth and thinking of it in terms of a natural resource, immediately you ask yourself, golly, what would we do if we found that resource? I mean, we would treat it like oil. We would treat it like something valuable, and believe me, the big countries of the world would see to it that they got their hands on it and controlled the territory that it had it.
To most offlanders, what you have here is more valuable than gold-pressed latinum.
you think of it in terms of contemporary life, a country, say the United States, might invade another country that happened to be controlling a great deal of oil just to make sure that they have access to the fuel and natural resources that we need to run our society. Well, translate that, as Star Trek does so well, into the metaphor of science fiction. You're talking about particles or whatever it is that creates this youth phenomenon. I saw an international and intergalactic possibility of great nations, great worlds coming together to essentially take what they wanted from people who were not in a position to defend it, which of course puts our heroes in the position of being the center of the moral universe, because they stand up for those people who have no other way to defend themselves.
Captain, I wasn't expecting you.
This is too important for the Enterprise to be on the sidelines, Admiral.
Commander Data attacked us in the mission scout ship yesterday. Rorfu and I have decided to send in an assault team.
The twists and turns of this particular script were so interesting, and so there were so many right turns and left turns that I compiled, with the studio's approval, draft after draft and change after change to show how the script evolved into what it ultimately became, for better or for worse. Someday I will publish that book. But enormous changes. I mean, we started out trying to tell too many stories. And that's fairly natural at the beginning of a writing process. I think if you look at the very early material, you see sort of Heart of Darkness meets the Magnificent Seven. You see a story of Data apparently has gone crazy. Our crew is sent to this strange planet. In the first version of the script, the people who populate this planet are all teenagers. They're all children. They never get to be any older than 25 or something like that. And ultimately, as we are going up the river, if you will, in the Heart of Darkness part of the story to find Data, suddenly our crew starts to undergo various strange changes. And as you go up the river, you begin to understand that there's something very special about this planet. Then you get to Data, you find him, you find out what's really going on, and then you go into the Magnificent Seven part of it, where we start trying to defend these people's rights. The problem with the script, very simply, was it was two movies trying. You know, you try hard as a writer to bring these two things together, and sometimes you just can't make it work. But Rick and I spent a great deal of time working on that story. I remember very clearly having written the first draft. And I will show it to a couple of trusted friends, very few, just to get an objective view, because you become so close to the material. You ultimately say you need a new pair of eyes to tell you the truth. And one of those friends is well-known to Star Trek people. It's Ira Behr, who was the executive producer and head writer of Deep Space Nine at the time. And Ira came over after he read it, and he sat down in this chair, and he put his arms back like this, and I put my arms back like this. He said, "Mikey, I wish I were here to tell you good news." And my heart fell. And as he started talking about the script and what he felt wasn't right about it, I knew immediately that he was right. I mean, you feel horrible when somebody tells you a script doesn't work. You have spent day after day saying, okay, that scene works, this scene works, that scene works, let's put them together. But ultimately, if the structure, screenplays are structure, if the structure doesn't work, and the structure of this screenplay, this first draft, didn't work, doesn't matter how good the scenes are, doesn't matter how many great moments that you have, you know, you just have to face the fact. And it takes time to get past that disappointment. Rick and I spent 10 days tearing it apart, putting it back together, taking each piece that we had discussed as elements we wanted to get into this movie, and reassembling them over and over again. And I finally just woke up one night and I said, you know what? We just got to take a machete and chop off the Heart of Darkness. We can't do both. So the whole idea of going up the river became 2 scenes in which we come and we find data, and ultimately then we get on with the movie.
Definitely feeling aggressive tendencies, sir.
Originally, when we came, when I came to the project, it had already been decided that we would do a lighter movie. Rick had just done First Contact, which was a dark, action-oriented movie. Somebody came to me, an executive from the studio, and said, you know what we ought to do this time? We ought to do, coming off that one, we ought to do like Measure of a Man for this one. So there was always the idea of doing a lighter movie and doing one in which we did a return to the lightheartedness of the voyage home. That was a direct idea. So when I was putting on my vitamin E that morning, obviously I was thinking of light, humor, funny, those sorts of things.
Don't panic.
I've been shot at, thrown into the lake out of a ship that's come to abduct us. What's there to panic about?
In the event of a water landing, I have been designed to serve as a flotation device.
Certainly when you talk about moving people, you think immediately of the American Indian. And you think in terms of the United States history, you know, as the white government of the United States decided that they wanted the territories that the Indians occupied, whether it be for homesteading or gold, then they moved the Indians. And of course you have the Trail of Tears. I think that probably had an influence on that particular part of the story.
We're only moving 600 people.
How many people does it take, Admiral, before it becomes wrong? 1,000? 50,000? 1,000,000? How many people does it take, Admiral?
Well, it was a very important scene for me to write. And I'll tell you why. I wanted Picard to be the moral center of the universe that we were exploring. When we conceived this idea, it was at a time in my career and in Star Trek that I saw the franchise moving away, perhaps, and a lot of people felt this way, perhaps it was by necessity, moving away from the original philosophy of Gene Roddenberry. I had a very simple goal for this movie, my goal as a writer. I wanted to do one for Gene. I wanted to do one that got back to the values that he taught me in the earliest days, because I had the benefit of his last year of active participation as executive producer on Next Generation. He taught me the fundamentals of Star Trek. And I thought I had a responsibility as the keeper of the flame. I wanted to do one for Gene. I wanted this to be an optimistic view of the future that Gene Roddenberry would appreciate. I wanted it to be about moral and ethical dilemmas, which I felt was the heart of Roddenberry's philosophy for Star Trek.
We are betraying the principles upon which the Federation was founded. It's an attack upon its very soul.
So when you come back to the question of Picard forced with a moral, ethical decision, is he going to follow orders or is he going to do what's right? You are going to the heart, I think, of Roddenberry's philosophy that great heroes are people who respond to those moral and ethical challenges and triumph.
Our job is to keep the planet inhabited. Will, Geordi, go back and put a face on what's happening here. Make the Council see the Baku.
It's too easy to turn a blind eye to the suffering of a people you don't know.
My original idea, the first image of Picard in this movie, for me, was an image of a single man with a rifle in the mountains, sort of a Hemingway-type hero who basically, you know the Hemingway story where his hero goes to fight the Spanish-American War, For Whom the Bell Tolls. Gary Cooper played him in the movie. I watched that movie again. And the idea of a single man going forward to basically stand on his principles, I thought was an extraordinary opportunity. However, it took great adversaries, a great enemy, to make that hero as great, I think, as Hemingway did and as what we wanted to do.
There's nothing further to be gained from this.
You're right. This is going to end now. The Baku want to stay on the planet, let them. I'm going to launch the injector.
You're not going to launch anything.
In 6 hours, every living thing in this system will be dead or dying.
Originally, I wanted Picard to stand up against the entire Federation. I think our earliest stories had a covert agreement between the Federation and the Romulans, as I recall. It seems it was the Romulans, to essentially join forces to get this natural resource out of this planet and to use it for their own means. So you have a story in that circumstance where our hero and his crew are standing up against the greatest forces in the galaxy. That he's stepping away from the Federation to take his own personal stand, and that is extraordinarily courageous.
Order them to surrender, and I promise you won't be court-martialed.
If a court-martial is the only way to let the people of the Federation know what is happening here, I welcome it.
As I watch the movie, there are things about it that I like a great deal. I think it has a spirit and a warmth and a humanistic quality that Gene Roddenberry would genuinely have appreciated. I think people are given a great ride. I think it's great fun. Does it accomplish all the things that I wanted it to? No. And I don't know that perhaps anything ever does for a writer who has a vision. But I do think that it holds up extremely well in the context of all the Star Trek movies. It tells a real story. And I keep coming back to the same principles that I appreciated so much. That it really explores a theme. It's about something. That was one of the big lessons that Roddenberry taught me. You know, what is this about, he would ask. And I can answer that about this movie.
What am I going to do without you?
I wish I could stay. But these are perilous times for the Federation. I can't abandon it to people who would threaten everything that I've spent a lifetime defending. I have to go back, if only to slow things down at the Federation Council. But I have 318 days of shore leave coming, and I intend to use them.
Gene Siskel, who is a friend of mine for many, many years, he and I worked together in Chicago at WBBM-TV and Channel 2 News when he was just starting out on television. Gene Siskel told me, actually I should say his wife told me, because Gene passed away shortly after this movie premiered, and he gave it a good review. Siskel said it was the only Star Trek movie that he'd ever genuinely liked. And that meant a great deal to me.